And this is the last time you'll ever hear from us.
No, you just say this is the last episode where we're gonna go over some of
the history of the show, talk about behind the scenes, and reflect on our experience.
Exactly.
Okay, so do you want to start with the...
I'll start, and then you could say the end.
Perfect. Okay. Let's go.
Welcome back to Unmasked, for the last time. This is Adam.
This is Ronnie.
And I'm Anna.
And we are here to reflect on what it's like to do this show. We've been doing this for... This is our 6th season, so we've been doing this for 6 semesters. And Adam and I are going to talk about what it was like to start the podcast, the changes that we've gone through, and then with the addition of Anna as one of our people to help us get quotes and talk to people and come up with questions this semester, we'll all talk about what it's been like speaking with our fellow students and making this show happen. So yeah, Adam, do you want to go in to start with the origins of the pod?
Yeah, so the origin story of the pod started with an idea of mine. I had a few pitches that I wanted to bring to the Daily Free Press, their podcast section. And some of the initial ideas were a international relations and cultural exposure podcast that would talk about like different news events that were going on around the world, bringing information from multiple sources, from multiple different news resources, and bringing information to the students on campus at BU about news, cuisine, culture, and commonalities between people. And my hope was to bring people together, bring people on the pod that were a part of those specific cultures that could say more onto the specific news that was going on at that time. And then eventually the hope of that specific podcast was to bring on professors who were experts in the field and bring them onto the pod too. But funnily enough, eventually another idea came. That was my second prompt that I gave to the Daily Free Press editors. And it was modeled off of a famous storytelling show called The Moth. And The Moth is a storytelling show that brings people to tell one story, a short story about themselves or about their life. And that idea for me was always interesting because it's a completely anonymous random person who comes to a stage and explains a story about themselves, something that could be very serious or something that could be more comedic. And I don't know, I always thought that like connection between the people and this person's story, their own individual self, was really interesting. So at the end of the day, the Moth kind of gave to what we called Unmasked. And Ronnie, I mean, you could describe why we named the thing Unmasked if you want.
Yeah, so for those who don't know, the Daily Free Press is the independent student newspaper at BU, at Boston University. And so that's how this podcast started, because they have a podcast section. And I was in that section at the time that Adam was coming to the Freep with these podcast ideas. And so that's how we became acquainted. And that was in our freshman semester. That was in our first semester of college, which was spring semester, because we were both general studies students and we get a gap semester in fall. So we had started in the spring. And then going into the next academic year, I became the section editor for the podcast department of the Freep. And that's how I was so involved in the creation of this podcast, because that semester was when all the brainstorming and like project management of the podcast was happening. We were designing the cover art. So I was working with the layout and graphic design section editor to put that cover art together, and it went through a lot of different like ideas of what we would do with that, and that was based off of that name, Unmasked, which I don't even remember if we brainstormed a bunch of different names, but we ended up with Unmasked to represent that we were uncovering students' opinions and like hidden things that people don't talk about much, because the types of questions that we were using are really getting at like personal, deep, vulnerable, just honest, even just funny. It's more like getting outside of the academic, the rigidity, and really getting into people's personalities and things that are real, that people might not get the chance to talk about on such a platform. So that's where the idea for that name came from. But we also understood that it was like a very interesting pun at the time, because it was the peak of pandemic regulations in schools and institutions. So we had to explain a lot that we weren't proponents of unmasking in that regard. It was just like the mask that we all wear, you know, the facade, the persona. That's really what we meant.
So I also wanted to mention, when initially starting, because of this moth idea, like longer storytelling, our initial push was to go and ask people a question that would be thought-provoking and then hear a story from them. But what we realized was that as you go from person to person, they might not have a story to tell about a specific question, or they might not be able to, because I mean, students are constantly on the move. They don't have too much time. They have classes coming up. So what eventually happened was the podcast turned into more of a shorter story or answer from each person when we asked the question each week. And it turned out to be something that was a bit like more fast fire. You would go up, ask a question, and you would get a lot of unique responses that each had their own value or interest. And yeah, we continued with me and Ronnie at the beginning, and we invited other people to the podcast, which Ronnie, you can mention. Because initially the job was a bit difficult. We both had a lot of work on our plates. We were full-time students, but we wanted to continue to grow what we had started, and we invited you can continue. We invited some people onto the pod.
Yeah, different people were interested in the podcast section at the time. And so we did have, in the very beginning, one person working on outreach. And then we had another person who was like co-hosting with me, because at the time, not co-hosting, but co-field recording, I guess is what you could call it, because we were out there getting quotes together. And this was when we were using a microphone and like going out on the street. We were walking down the street. The audio quality of the first season was terrible because there's like wind in the background. And that was before realizing that the best microphone is just the iPhone was even better than that. Like, but you know, it's fine. And then in that beginning first 2 seasons, I think, if not just the first one, Adam was remotely participating in Unmasked. So he was the host. So he was the first voice you heard, and he recorded on his own, like a little intro, like to whatever the topic or the theme of the episode is. Whatever the question we were asking, we would write this like literary couple paragraphs about it, and then he would read that, and so you can hear that in the beginning episodes. And that was something that we got rid of because it's not necessary. Just get straight into it.
I don't remember exactly what it was, but it was something along the lines. There was some sort of like extra narration, but yeah,
it would be like if the episode was, what music are you listening to, you hear Adam for the first 2 minutes talking about whenever you walk on campus,
how it relates.
You can see students with headphones. They could be listening to anything. So now we're interested in learning about people's music tastes because music is important for these reasons, whatever, blah, blah, blah.
If you want to go back to some of those intros, they're always available. You can go check
they
them
are.
out.
No, the episodes changed a lot. The music changed every time. It used to be like chill piano music, very academia, and then we got more diverse, I guess, with it.
Hip hop, techno, R&B kind of
Lo-fi.
style. You're mixing it up.
Yeah.
Lo-fi is what was important to put in.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask or bring up another interesting point that I thought was just a change for me when I initially started working with the pod, was the idea of going up to people and, cold asking them questions without, barely introducing yourself. I mean, you say you're associated with a podcast and you want to ask them a specific question, you're looking for an answer, right? So what I wanted to bring up now was I wanted to compare and contrast the feeling that Anna had when she started compared to our feeling, because Anna, she recently joined the podcast and has been greatly contributing and helping us out and has been supporting the team with her great positive energy. But I wanted to compare and contrast. So Anna, you could start just what your feelings were when you first started. Were you nervous, etc.? How did that feel? And then I think me and Ronnie can discuss our own ways of trying to figure out that path.
The idea of participating on a podcast was pretty cool to me at the beginning because I listen to podcasts all the time. I actually started off as a listener of your guys' podcast, which is how I knew about it. The prospect of asking people questions in the GSU was very, very scary. Very scary. I always know people there, so many new faces as well, and just going up randomly and, like you said, barely introducing yourself and being like, here, I have a podcast. Do you want to answer this question? And not knowing how people are going to react was scary at first. But the more you do it and the more you get into the rhythm, the better it gets, to be honest. And after a bit, I started loving it. I started loving hearing the new perspectives that new people brought up and meeting new people as well. That was pretty cool.
Thank you for sharing. Yeah. I mean, since we've been doing this for so long, it really is something that you do get used to. And it's something that I would consider myself an ambivert, but I'm definitely very good at being extroverted. And so, just talking to strangers in a polite enough way, in a respectful way, but knowing that people don't owe you the time of day, finding that balance where sometimes when people are dismissive, I think that can be the worst part of it. It's just having that anxiety of people being rude to you or being disrespectful of what you're doing or feeling like you're encroaching on their personal space, you just have to remember, you're being respectful. We're never recording people without their consent, without their knowledge. We're never going up already recording because that would be very inappropriate. But understanding that it's not really about you if people are rude, because strangers come up to you all the time on the street. You're caught off guard. It's unexpected. But if we're being respectful and we know that, then it bounces right off you every time people are rude. It's so easy to just say, no, thank you, in a polite way, or we're busy. So I think that's probably the worst part is when people are disrespectful, but you just, over time, it's nothing, you just move on. But it's something that has made me so much more open to random encounters like that. And I just give people the time of day more often when they're trying to talk about their organization or whatever. Having this experience, I definitely don't I understand what it's like on the other side.
I definitely struggled with that as well. A little bit is like I felt at first that I was like bothering people, that I was up in their space, very much. But it really, you just gotta remind yourself that, you also deserve, you have the opportunity as well to ask the questions, and like it's not bothering anyone. And if it is, they can say so and respectfully will go away. Like we also can take up space and we can raise our voices, just as much.
Just to add on to both you guys, I mean, I think at the end of the day, for me, it just increased like the amount of comfort I had. You experience so many different people, different reactions to you just coming up to them randomly. You almost get accustomed to certain reactions, and you've seen so many of them over time, over the past 6 semesters that we've been doing it, that you almost start to get a feeling before the person even starts responding by their body language, whether they're actually going to want to or not. And it's interesting for me because this is applicable to other things in life as well. So I found a lot of positive things have come from just going up to people and practicing this, risk, kind of brave, courageous, just going up and asking a random question. And it really has benefits for a lot of other things, and really helps with your own confidence in yourself. And it doesn't make you feel self-conscious anymore about you in like a crowded room. You feel comfortable and you can really go up to anybody, ask anyone a question. And I actually found myself, the biggest change for me was that I started asking random people on the streets questions. Like any person I'll walk by, I wouldn't have a problem asking them a question about what's happening or what's going on here. And it might seem silly, but I think that's a major change that probably I think should happen for everybody if they can. It really helps. It's like liberating.
I think that's also kind of the whole point of Unmasked, is to be like, to let your guard down and not to be afraid to be vulnerable and to be honest and to have conversations that allow people to explore different parts of themselves with each other in a given moment, because there's a lot of pressure to be on all the time in a certain way and portray yourself in a certain way. And that can be very fatiguing and take a lot of energy. So being able to have the opportunity to not have to like think super hard and be challenged, but just to be like, oh, who are you? Tell me about yourself. We want to know, like we're giving that space for that, I think is something that definitely we need to be more used to, or like lean more into in our culture, in our society. And so like having that transition from the way we used to format the episodes, very, very rigid, very serious, with the whole like host aspect that's separate from the field reporters and everything. I think over time, or I know over time, we deliberately made changes that allowed Unmasked to be more free and to be more chill and to be just way more fun, because that was really what it's about, is just like real, open, honest. And one thing that was interesting that contributed to that whole aim was when Adam started the bloopers, because we didn't used to have bloopers at the end of the episodes, but there was one time that he edited, we would trade off editing, like each week, every other week would be one of us, and then he edited one episode and he was like, listen to the end. And so I did, and I was like, oh my gosh, there's little like outtakes at the end, which is so fun. Like it's so cool to do interesting things with audio with podcasts, because you don't have the video aspect. So there's so many things you can do and find that humor. There's always a humorous aspect of every episode. So having the bloopers at the end was really cool, and always like looking, like while editing, just like laughing at certain things that happened.
Welcome back to Unmasked.
I'm Ronnie Thompson. And we're asking people, what are we asking people today?
You recorder?
We are.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
This is the QR code for the episode if you're interested. Thank you.
For 3 semesters.
Yeah.
We're on season 3.
Year and a half.
Thank you.
QR code.
Here's the QR code for the episode.
Episode comes out every
Wednesday.
Oh my god, hold on.
Fine, we'll cut it. You're good. You're good.
I was eating a tater tot.
Just no. Every answer is meaningful as long as it's honest.
Oh shit. That's Oh, am I?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay. Wait. Come back to me, and I'll give you a clever answer in a second.
You can find like these little points of inflection about that individual, and you can provide them. I don't even know what I'm saying.
Like learn.
To me, if I walk over the seal or if like someone steps over me, but at the same time, like, why not take them? Oh, that was bad luck.
If you drop your phone.
If you drop your phone, you have to pick it back up. That's my superstition.
What's the weather like today, Adam?
It is
That's crazy.
57 degrees outside in Fahrenheit for the Americans. For the other individuals, we'll cut this out. It's about 10-15 degrees
It's 14.
centigrade.
It's 14 degrees Celsius,
That was close.
which is amazing.
14 degrees centigrade.
Wait, let's wait for the cart to go by so our audio can be.
Lots of cards. All right. Go.
What is your favorite? I think it's something that I want to pose to y'all is your opinion on brainstorming questions and that whole experience, what that's like. Because for me, the main challenge of questions is after having done it for so long, we knew that there were certain questions that, like how an episode would go even before starting it, based on the question and based on the wording even. We knew that we needed to ask questions in a certain way for people to be open, to understand them, and to make sure that we weren't going to get the same answer from everyone. Because there are certain questions that are way more open than others. And you can't ask a yes or no question. So maybe you all can talk about that, because we all came up with questions. We all saw what it was like to ask those questions and saw how people reacted to certain questions versus others. So I think that's a cool behind the scenes thing to share.
Okay, so towards the end, I feel like I went into the podcast little by little. I started off like as a listener, then I asked a bit of questions. I was holding the little poster and being like, oh, here's the QR code.
Yeah, talk about the poster.
The little poster, yeah, we carried a QR code. And my part when I joined was literally being like, there's a podcast. Here's the little what's that called? The cover page. And then there will be a QR code. So at the end, I would be like, if you want to listen to it, here's the QR code. But after, I also started, so I feel like I asked a question from time to time. I came up with questions. I helped choose what you guys had, the list. And it's pretty hard to come up with questions. I'm not gonna lie. Like, you guys have been at it way longer than I have. So obviously me being the most recent addition, I was struggling a bit. Like, every time I would come up with a question, you'd be like, well, yes, but how do we rephrase it? How do we make it so people can answer it and talk about it? But I like coming up with questions just because I feel like a part of the podcast that we haven't talked about is how we also answer the questions. So I don't know if that's changed from the beginning and if you guys want to talk about that, but you also reflect a lot on yourself. So I would ask questions sometimes that I also would want to know about myself and that I was reflecting about. So that was pretty cool. And it really helped a lot knowing myself as well, along with the other BU community.
Wow. That's just a good response. I don't know if we did a response of our own at the beginning. I don't remember. But we incorporated it at some points just to provide ourselves with a little bit of space to also mention our thoughts, because I mean, at the end of the day, we were making the podcast and making the episode in the first place. But I think you bring up a very important point, that in general, this just gives us the opportunity to really think, and not only to just come up with the question, but actually have to be put in the same position as our responders and our listeners, and to have to answer the question in a short amount of time. The thing that always was like striking me was that when we ask a question to these students, we're looking for an answer within 10 to 30 seconds, maybe a minute. We give them more time. Sometimes we'll come back and we'll give them some more time to think if it's a more difficult question. And I think to myself, and I'm like, when I'm responding to the question, I have the entire episode, recording of the episode, to think about what my response is. And I'm like, man, I start to realize and empathize with the students. Like, how are you supposed to come up with with an answer in such a quick fashion? But at the end of the day, I think the questions that we asked were curated to allow for them to think about it and create an answer. That's why we were thinking about the questions beforehand, to make sure that they could do that. But I always thought that was an interesting dynamic there.
Yeah, that's why we would circle back a lot to people. It was always nice to tell that a person or a group of people had an interest in the question, because people would often be like, wow, that's a really good one, or like, I have to think. And know that they want to answer it, but that they needed some time. So then we would get some more quotes and come back to those people. That was important. I don't remember if we always did the answering the question at the end. I don't think we did, because the format where you were like the hosts and we were field reporters didn't really allow for that. But I remember us deciding that we wanted to incorporate ourselves more, because it was like we started in the beginning with answering the question, and other than that, we weren't really in the pod as much. And I remember that was something that was very intentional, was having that debrief section at the end. And I think it started off with us reflecting on each episode and how, like, I guess a behind the scenes look, and how the quotes went, and talking about whether the question was good based on what kind of answers we got or what we thought about people's responses. Like, we would analyze the episodes at the end. And then eventually it was only us answering the questions and not really like going in depth about like our opinions on how the episode went. Make it more simple. But yeah, we definitely incorporated ourselves more and more by asking follow-up questions and having that commentary, having that back and forth with respondents in the quotes themselves. So that was good. I think I guess there were like a few different types of questions. One would be like, okay, you're gonna get the same answer from everybody. Like, what is your idea of home? A lot of people were talking about family, understandably. But people talked about different aspects of family, or we would dig deeper to say, like, who is in your family? What is that home environment like, etc. That was an editing challenge. Is like, how do we make this episode still interesting to a listener when most of the answers are basically the same thing? And then the other type of question is like very, like, an automatic answer is going to come to your head because there's only one answer for you. Like, where are you from? Or how many languages do you know? That type of thing. And people already, they know that's like a thing that's like identity based. So people are just going to talk about whatever the answer actually is because it's a fact. And then the third type is like very open-ended, like opinions about things, the type of question where you know you're going to be able to get a lot of varied responses. Like, what are your interesting dreams? Or what is a red flag in a relationship or in a friendship or even in parenting was something that we asked. What makes you laugh was a great episode because that was so funny. How do your friends describe you versus how would you describe yourself?
I thought that episode in particular was interesting, how like your friends versus yourself, because we were able to incorporate the entire group together. Like we were able to ask the friends how they describe one particular person while the other person left the table. And then when the person came back, then we asked them to describe themselves, and then everyone could like work with one another. Like, I don't know, at the end of the day, that was one of the most interesting episodes because we were really unmasking and uncovering like how people are interacting within a friend group. Like that's such a small microcosm of like a relationship within the entirety of the school, within the entirety of GSU. So I thought the fact that we were able to get to that like detail and that granularity was like a huge like success. Like doing something like that I thought was massive.
Yeah. I agree.
I think another part that I really liked, another question that I think really unearthed was, what are some misconceptions? That really got in depth because that's like what people thought of a person, but it really showed that nothing is how you truly think it is. And like people are more layered than you truly think they are, you know? So it's always good to keep in mind that, you know, something you might think of someone might not necessarily be the full truth or the truth at all. I really liked asking that question and seeing the responses.
So, in sum, we have learned a lot throughout this journey. We've grown a bunch. I could definitely say so for myself. I've definitely grown a bunch. I have learned more than my fair share about others around me that I probably would never have known if I didn't have a platform like this to be able to use and then learn it from. And I'm very glad that Ronnie came to be a podcast editor and has continued to support in this journey. And I'm very glad that we have Anna here too to help us out in the last season. And I would never take it any other way. If I opened up that IR podcast, none of this would have ever happened. So I'm very glad that the Daily Free Press people who were in the meeting with me pushed the moth idea rather than the IR idea. And I'm very glad that we eventually got to this point because I see many benefits and friendships that started because of it. What do you guys think?
Yeah. I was just gonna say, I mean, one thing about doing these episodes is that you get so many different people. You get a lot of regulars. There were people who were on multiple different episodes. People we would see weekly. We didn't even have to go through the whole spiel of like, oh, we have this podcast. It's called this. This is what we do every week. But then each episode, we get people who had never heard of Unmasked. And we were always in the same location in GSU at the same like time. So that was interesting, is that the amount of people that are on these episodes, if they all actually listened, we'd have so many listeners to the podcast. It'd be like a lot, like maybe 500. I don't know, a lot of students.
Oh, definitely more than that. Yeah, we interviewed an entire population.
Yeah, we had a lot of people. But I was gonna say that this podcast is not something that I expected that I was going to do coming into college. It's not something that was in the plans. And that's the beauty of it. Like, none of us are journalism majors. None of us are really in that
100%.
world. I hadn't had any experience with podcasting. I wasn't even that much of a podcast listener before college, but now, you know.
Ronnie taught me how to edit.
Yeah, well, I had learned how to edit just a couple semesters before I taught you. So, Adobe Audition. It's crazy how life works and how college opens you up to these new opportunities and new people. We might not even have really gotten as close as we did if not for this podcast, because we were both in CGS, but that is not how we met.
And we should even mention the point that the podcast, we did a podcast in London for our CGS program for an assignment. This extracurricular thing that we did turned into a project and supported our schooling. Like, I mean, that's crazy to me. We were international. The podcast is international.
Yes.
That's crazy.
That podcast episode was cool too, because we did interesting things with music and editing, and we had a bunch of different segments. We were interviewing students about their experience on the trip. We were interviewing people out in the park, Londoners, city dwellers. It was cool. And then we were like, we got sounds of the things we were doing and the trips we were taking. So that was very fun, and that's not something that we would have done if not for Unmasked.
That's so sweet. I think I'm also very grateful for the fact that I was invited here too. Honestly, the first podcast actually seems right up my alley because I'm an international relations major. But honestly, I also didn't know that I was gonna do this. I didn't even know you had a podcast when we first met, and we haven't talked about it until this semester, but we met like my freshman year. So that's pretty curious how I didn't find out until way later, and then I started getting into it a bit. But I'm very thankful that this happened and this surprising turn of events happened the way it did, because I feel also like it made me very close to you guys, and it like strengthened our friendship, and it strengthened my relationship to myself as well, to others on campus. It was very introspective, I would say, and like also learning about other people a lot. So that was very insightful and very like a very nice experience to have, and I'm very thankful that I was invited.
Well, we're happy to have had you. Yeah. It was great. It was a great moments that we shared together. It was the friends we made along the way.
And with this, I mean, we are concluding. I mean, this is our final episode. We're sad to say, but this will be most likely our final iteration of this baby that we have nurtured over the past 3 years.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't say it's full grown, but I definitely would say it's definitely matured to the point where what else do we want to say to end it off? I'm kind of just rambling at this point.
I don't know.
It's a very bittersweet moment. I mean, everything has to come to an end, I guess. But like it had a good run. It had a good amount of time. It turned into something great. And I feel like throughout all of this, you guys put so much effort, and you can tell, and so much love and care. So it's really nice to see, even if it has to end, everything comes to an end. Yeah. But I hope you guys can be proud of what you made, what you created, because it was a very beautiful environment, to be honest. As a listener, as a participant, as in like answering questions, as helping you guys, it was a very beautiful environment that you guys created, and a very safe space for people on campus.
Thank you for saying that.
Oh. Wow.
And thank you for listening.
With tears in my eyes, we send our salutations to our listeners. Thank you for your continued support, and we wish you the merriest of journeys.
Oh my gosh, what do we say at the end of our episodes?
So what we'll do is I'll
other
say
places besides
until
Spotify.
next time, and then we all say goodbye at the same time. You
Okay,
wanna do
until
that?
next time, and then we all say goodbye at the same time. Okay.
Until next time.
Goodbye.
Goodbye. You know, we gotta do that again.
Okay.
Until next time. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Oh my bro, this is actually not gonna work. Okay, all right, someone else.
Until next time. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
They don't have to all be at the same time.
They don't all have to be at the
They
same
don't.
time. I was going to suggest
So many goodbyes.
Bye bye. Bye bye.